Hello, welcome to JavaScript tutorial. This is Sherful. In this lecture, we're going to learn prototype. So prototype, one of the very unique features of object-oriented programming in JavaScript. Unlike any other programming language, prototype is the unique features for only it's available in JavaScript. So what is prototype? So the prototype is a global object. It's kind of like hidden object, or you can say it's a global object that is associated with every functions and objects by default in JavaScript. So in JavaScript, the functions is object. You can say it's you can create an object where you will have some properties or even a class. So anything you can say it's JavaScript is object. So any objects, it's associated with a global object. What global object has a lot of its own properties method that can be used in your functions or your other objects, and that comes from the prototype. So prototype, you can say it's a hidden global object that is associated with every function, your objects, your class, and then there is some benefits. We'll see the benefits. So let's see this where this prototypes comes from. Where, since it's not, I said it's a hidden. So why it's hidden? Where is the prototype we can see? And then we'll see there's some use case. So let's get back to our VS Code. So I have a very simple index.html file. It's very simple. It has just only one header, which is welcome to CodeBox Automation Lab, and there is a paragraph, but we don't need this paragraph right now. But I have another file I created. It's called protodemo.js. So I pass this protodemo.js. It's over here as a JavaScript file. So protodemo has the information. This HTML have the information with the protodemo.js file, like my JavaScript file. So here I have very simple one object I created. It's called name. So it's like JavaScript. You can create a object. A function is object. You can create a your regular. There is an object where you can have some properties. So names is a object, and it has some properties, two properties: f name and l name, first name, last name, and this is the DeLeon and Megiddo. And then I did it console.log. So I printed this I call this name object. So it should print, if I see over here, if I just run code, so you will see the output here, right? So it's saying this is your f name. Okay, hold on. So let me just clear this output, and after that we can run it again. Here we go. You can see it's calling this names. So it has two properties, which is one is f name and there is a last name. So first name, last name. So this is the output. So let's see. So this is an object. We said prototype is a global object which is associated with your function or any object in your JavaScript, right? So we should have see the prototype which is associated with this object too, where we can see. So let's open our browser, since that's why I pass this JS file to our index.html so that we can see the browser output. Okay, so let's open my browser where these files I have. So here is a output. You can see. So here this is the welcome to CodeBox. Welcome to CodeBox. This is the output in my browser. Since, as you know, like a JavaScript, is hosted through your HTML code. So that's why now this is the output. And now if you go to the console, you can see here is your f name and the first name and last name, right? Which is it comes from our JavaScript, because we didn't do anything except this this object have just two properties, right? And we printed this, so that's why it shows underneath console. And then if you just expand this, you can see there is one object. It's called proto, and this is the object. So this is the proto object. It comes with your associate with your object name, like names object. right? So you can see over here, and if you expand it, you can see, you know, there's a lots of other, you know, properties over here. If you go, you can see, so this proto, it's an object. This is the prototype object comes to the picture, and here it has lots of properties and method. You can see like a toString is a method, right? So there's a lots of properties over here, like there's a constructor, and you can see inside the constructor there's a lots of also some methods properties you can use. So prototypes comes with lots of methods and properties, you know, that can be used on your actual object or your function or in your class, you know, to add some properties in later stage. So using in any one of the methods or properties, you know, you can use this prototype. Since prototype is associated with by default, you know, it is a by default object that comes with your associated with your methods, your functions, your class, your object. So using prototype, you can add later on any properties in your, say over here we have just two properties, right? So if you want to add later on any properties to this object, you can do it by the help of, you know, prototype. So prototype, it's give you, you know, freedom that help you to add any properties on your object in later stage. That's one of the use case, and there is another use case. You can find also your properties from your object using the prototype. So let's get back to our you know, our notes here. So we said the prototype, right? The prototype is a global object now that is associated with every function and object by default in JavaScript, right? So that's the answer we found. And so, you know, in other words, you can say that all the objects have access to the object's prototype, right? So all the objects, whatever the all this everything in JavaScript is object, we say all the objects have access to the object's prototype, right? So prototypes, you know, the properties, it means prototype properties. And we say the use case, right? So use case is if we want to add new properties at later stage to function, class, or any object which will be shared across all the instance. We'll see. Okay, we'll see an example in a function, in a class, where you can, you know, add your any properties to your function in later stage, and it can share by any number of instance. Okay, so you create an object. Instances means when you create an object of a function or class, those are the instance. So no matter how many instances you create of a class or objects or function, you know, if you want to add any properties, it will be able to access from any instance. Okay, so that's one of the, you know, best use case of prototype. And also you can find properties and method of an object. So we'll see the example, some example, you know, how we can use the prototype to add some properties on later stage. Okay, let's get back to our VS Code. So let's create one file, another JS file. We can say proto demo1.js. Okay, so up here let's create a function. So we're going to see how the prototype can help you to add some properties on later stage to any function that can be shared with across any instance. Okay, let's create a function. So we know this how to create a function. Use the keyword function, right? And then let's give a name of the function, say student, right? And after that, this is your body of your function, right? So let's put some properties of the function, right? So let's declare some variable, and I'm going to use this keyword so that this function's variable is to your function level. I mean, it's a global level, global variable. So let's say I would say David, okay, and then let's say another variable, this dot, let's say gender, then gender equals to, we'll say male. Okay, so two variable to global variable. It's on a function level, so since I use this, right, so it's to global variable I declare inside the function. Okay, so now let's create an object of our function. So since in JavaScript your function also is an object, so if you use the object, so you can easily create your object of that function. So let's create an object. So so let's create it. To create an object, you have to use the new keyword and then the name of your function, student, right, and then puts in a variable, right, puts in a variable. Say let's put in a variable, say obj1. Let's put in a obj1 and then return type. Okay, so now this obj1 is the object reference which is point to your function. So obj1 has the knowledge, all the properties you have in this function, like both two properties, right? Now if I want to add, say you need to add one more properties to this function, like to a student function. So example, you need to add age. What you can do? So I can easily use this object reference, because JavaScript give you that option, so that you can add later on any properties to any object. So using your object reference, that's the simple way you can do. First, obj dot age. So I declare the properties name and I said 20. Okay, so now it should be good, right? So now this age properties is now it will be added to your underneath your student function. So now if I want to say console, let's say that if I can if I can retrieve the data, this age is part of this student function or not, it should print, right? So if I say console dot log and then we said so we use object reference again, obj dot then age, right? So it should able to print the age value. So let's save it, run it. You can say 20. Okay, so age 20 is printing. So it means now age properties is now part of this student function. Now if I want to create another object, so let's create another object. Object is like another instance of this student function, right? So this is the first instance and now I'm creating another instance. So let's give a object reference name is 2. So obj2 is now the object reference of another instance of student function, right? So now if I want to call this, if I want to call this same age properties from this student function using obj2 object reference, using this object reference for the second instance. So if I use, let's see what happened. Okay, so in this case it works, but over here I created another instance, another object of this function. So it's a new instance using the second object reference and call this this properties, age property. So let's save it and then run it again. Okay, let me clear it. Okay, let me run it again. Run, good. Now you can see the first one it's a 20, but the second one it's saying undefined. So this one it's saying undefined, it's not able to define. The reason why, because I use the object reference from the first instance object reference to add this property. So this properties, age properties, is only available for the first instance, it's not available for the second instance. So how come I can make a common, I can add one properties on later stage that will be available for every instance, that can be shared with every instance? How can we do this? Because this is something that's gonna be help you really in real case. If you are able to create if you are able to add any properties to your object so that it can share by any instance, any number of instance, right? So that's the one of the dynamic advantages, I would say, in the real life when you do the code. So how come we achieve that? Prototype comes to the picture then. So prototypes, it helps you, since prototype, it's an object, global object, so it's associated with your any object like your function method, so it is associated with this function too. So we can use prototype, and that can help you to add your extended properties to this function, and that can be retrieved anytime from any instance. Okay, let's see that how can we do this. So here, since this is, I'm not going to use this one, this is limited to first instance, first object. So here what I'm going to do, I'm going to use, so to use your prototype object to any other object like student, you have to call your actual object like a student dot then prototype. So call the prototype, you can see that your prototype object dot, if you want to add any other whatever the variable or properties you want to add to that function, that object, you say age equals to, give the value, say 20. Okay, now notice that. So now prototype, since it has its own lots of methods and properties that can help, underneath it will help to add this age property, which is the value is 20, to this function, to this a student function, so which is available now every instance. Like we have instance, this one, the first instance, we have a second instance. Now let's run this code. So we made a comment this one, so it should be now, and previously we saw this for instance 2, the age is undefined. Let's see, we can run it. Right, here we go. So this is the first result. So, and this is the first time it was undefined, but now you can see it's 2020, it's showing. So this 20 is coming from here, and this 20 also coming from your second instance. So the problem is resolved. So that's one of the big advantages using the prototype object to any object that can help you to add any properties to your objects, right? In a later stage that can be shared. Number of instance. So those are the instance, or you can say object of your student object. Okay, so that's the use case, one of the benefits. Now we'll see. So this is the one benefits we have seen. The same way we can see, we can create probably in a class. We'll see that how we can use in a class. Okay, use the prototype in a class. Okay, let's create another JS file. So I would give a name protodemo2.js. Okay, so here we're going to create a class. So let's create a class. So create a class, class keyword, right? So give a name employee, and then your class body, right? So this is a class body. So inside a class body, let's create a constructor, and here inside a constructor, let's pass 2 parameter. I would say probably EID, employee ID, and also ename. Okay, and this is the body of constructor, and here let's declare 2 global variable in the class level. So that's why I'm using again this keyword. So ID equals to EID, and then this dot, probably I would say name, this dot ID name equals to ename. Okay, so it's same one, ename. Ename. Right? So clear? So it's very simple. Employee class, create a constructor, have 2 parameters, and this 2 parameter has been assigned to 2 global variable, which is this ID and this name. Okay, so this ID and name have this assigned this eid ename. So when you will call the create an object of this class and then pass the actual argument, so it will be replaced by this eid ename. So this id will have the actual value, right? So now let's see, assume that later stage you need to add some more another properties in this constructor. Okay, sorry, in this class. So in this class you have a two variable right now, just two id and name. So you want to add another properties or another variable with a value in this class level. How can we do this? And that can be shared any number of instance. So whatever the number of object you create for this employee class, it will be shared across all instance. So again, prototype comes to the picture. So to use to add any properties to this class level, so use the class name like employee dot use the proper prototype, call the prototype and dot say example I'm going to add say salary as sale, right? And then say we're going to say say 100,000, right? 100,000. Okay, so that's the salary we want to add for this employee ID and then for this employee and ID. So, and after that, now let's create an object of this class. So creating some instance or object. So to creating instance, use the again new keyword your class name, right? And then puts in a variable. Say puts in a variable. I would say employee 1. So this is the object reference, and then so this is the object reference, right? So this emp1 is the object reference for this, which is pointing to this employee class, right? So it means this emp1 have the knowledge about your constructor, so all the properties, so both properties, the like two variable, including this salary, because salary is now this sal property is already added to this employee class. But since you have a constructor, we know that if you have a constructor in a class, when you create an object of the constructor, create an object of the class, your constructor gets invoked by default. So it's all by default constructor is calling over here by this object. So it means your constructor have a two parameter over here, eid and name. So it means you have to pass the actual argument or value instead of this two parameter, right? So let's pass some say 110. This is the employee ID, and name I would say example John. Okay, so now eid is 1110 and ename is John. So now your ID is 1110 and the name is John, got replaced, right? Got assigned. And now your salary also 100,000, right? So that's the three properties you have this class which is already assigned. Right now, if I want to say console dot log and say, let's see, now if I want to print those global variables like ID, name and salary value, I can easily print those. How can I can print using object reference dot, I can say ID, right? And then again dot, I can say ename, right? Ename, and then again use the object reference dot, I can say cell, like salary, right? So that should print here all the values, right? Let's see. Let's clear output and clear here. Here we go. Wait a minute, it's saying 101 undefined, so it's got a salary, but it's the name didn't print. Why name didn't print? Oh, sorry, I made a mistake. Ename. Let's make sure that you have the same, right? Right. So let's it again, run it again. Still it's saying undefined. Why it's saying undefined? This name oh sorry, I'm not printing the ename, I'm printing this, I have to call this is the actual, okay, sorry, right? So run the code. Now we can see, okay, 101 John and then 100,000. so ID is 101 and the name variables is got assigned by this John, and then also cell has the properties, the value, which is 100,000. so it's printing over here, right? So that's the way you can call your properties, what's is been added later stage through your prototype and from your instance. So if I want to create, if I create another instance, say example, I create another instance, right? So in this case I would say 220, and here I would say Shoreful, okay, and then this is the object reference would be 2, and now if I call the same thing, you will see, okay, so employee ID, so let's change the object reference to 2, and then this is the new object reference is 2, right? So now save it, now run it. You can see this is the first one for the first object reference, using the first object reference instance, the ID, name and salary, and this is the second one, ID, name and salary. So you see the salary, it's fixed, which is coming from this, using the prototype. We use the prototype to inject later on in our employee class, which is can be shared through any instance. Like, doesn't matter how many instance we create, we can easily get we can easily retrieve the data, retrieve the value what is been added later on to your class. So also, not only you can add any properties like any variable to your class. What if you want to add later on, you think you want to add a function to this class? How can you do this? Again, the prototype comes to the picture. You can use same way. So let's add a function. So assume that you need to add a function later on. So again, it's the same thing you are going to do. You use your class name, then prototype, and then you give a whatever the function name. Say I give a name get employee. So okay, I give a name get employee is the function, then equals to your keyword of the function, and then the body of the function. So this is the way, the syntax to to add any function to your class in later stage using the prototype. So your class name dot your prototype dot whatever the function name you want to give. So example, I said a get employee, and then equals to function keyword, since you are going to add the function, and add the function by this name, and here is the body of your function, right? So let's what I want to do, I say now instead of printing all those employee ID, name and salary value by every instance, I can just add over here using our this keyword. So this ID, so this name, and then this salary. Okay, so now this function have the, it's calling ID, name and salary, so it will able to retrieve, print all the value associated to this variable ID, name and salary. So over here we don't need anymore. So what do we need? We need to call this function, okay? So if I call this function, inside the function we have the body, which is will be print all this the value of the ID, name and salary. So let's make a commented. So how can you call a function from a class? Very simple. We have already created object reference, right? So we already created object reference. In this time we can just use the object reference to call any properties of your class, right? So our in this case our properties, the function name is get employee, right? Get employee. So just call the get employee. Okay, similarly you can call for second one too, here too. So you can just make sure you change the object reference as per your instance, Okay, so you can, that's what pretty much you can say, right? So let's clear output and then run it again. Here we go. So this is the first one, by calling this your get employee function from the here and here inside all the values. So it's coming from here, and then this is the coming from the second. So if you want to make it more clear, maybe you can just say get employee, say console.log. you can say probably let's make it I would say okay, employees from the first instance. Okay, employee from first object. Okay, employee from first object, and after that you can have this, and then again, so you can differentiate it, the value employee from the second object. Okay, let's run it again, make sure let's clear it, let's run it again. Here, so employee from the first object, which is this one. So here it's coming from the value is coming from here that we pass 10110 John, and then employee from the second object, second object. Okay, and then this is the values coming from the second object that we pass. Okay, and here is the function that we added later on to our class, this function to our class level. It's a later using the prototype global object, which is associated, as I said, prototype global object is associated with any function, your function, your object, your class. So everything in a JavaScript is object. So with all those real object, prototype is a global hidden object that is associated as a by default. So using the prototypes, and it has its own properties and methods. Using those methods properties, behind the scene, you can add any properties to your actual object in later stage. So this is one of the very use case that we have seen over here. The prototype over here, the use case, if we want to add a new properties at later stage to a function, class, or object, which will be shared across all the instances. So we have seen it's been shared across all different objects, all different instances, right? So there was, and whether you added any properties, it means you added a variable later on, or you add even a function to a class level. Okay, so that's the benefits or one of the use case of the prototype. So that's all about the prototype, we can say. Okay, so prototype, it's very unique features, unique object oriented programming features. Okay, it is the part of object oriented programming in JavaScript, and it's only unique, specific to JavaScript. Okay, unlike any other programming language. So that's all about the prototype. Thanks a lot. If you like this tutorial, please share with others, and hit the like button, and stay tuned. Thanks a lot. Have a good one. Bye bye.